All right, we are live as usual. Who's listening? Who knows? Thanks for joining me on a Thursday night. I'm out of town tomorrow, which is why I'm doing this tonight. But as always, you can leave all your comments in the chat. You can support this show by going to patreon.com/Hemant, which is always appreciated. And if you want your questions answered, please leave a super like. Those get priority, but we will try to take questions. As before, I have my buddy Den, who is helping me out in the chat to moderate some things. And so if there's any issues, he'll take care of it. And we'll get to questions in between stories. I have seriously like 500 things I'm going to share with you. The tabs are all open. The first thing I should say, let me get to this right here. On Saturday night, if you are in the Denver area, I am speaking at the Secular Hub, and you can find all that information right over here at secularhub.org. I will leave that link in the comments. But that is Saturday night. There are tickets you need to get for that if you want to come by. But if you're in the area, that would be wonderful. It would be cool to meet people in person. I don't get out much anymore, so this will be fun for everybody, right? So if you can come there, fantastic. Let's get to the stories because the first one I want to talk about, it involves this guy. If you don't know who this guy is, his name is Johnny Hunt, and I'm going to tell you an insane story about this guy, okay? Johnny Hunt used to be the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. It's the largest Protestant denomination in the country. And the reason he's in the news involves a bit of hypocrisy that honestly blows my mind at the staggering level of hypocrisy here. I will say, for anyone who is watching this clip on YouTube when I post it later, there are going to be some very graphic things I talk about in this because I'm going to read from allegations that were made against this dude. So you have been warned that I am going to talk about that stuff. But if you don't follow a lot of the news surrounding the Southern Baptist Convention, let me run through some of the stuff they've been through over the past couple of years. Because a few years ago, local newspapers realized, you know how the Catholic Church kind of keeps records of the people who work for them, people who are abused, people who get shuttled to different churches when they are accused of abuse. And that's part of the reason there have been all these lawsuits against the Catholic Church. And I mean, it's all in writing. We know who works there, we know the hierarchy and all that. Well, the Southern Baptist Convention does not function as a hierarchy. It's like a collection of, thousands of churches, thousands of people, millions of people across the country. So they're more independently run, but they give some money to the main organization to fund things like mission trips and whatnot, things like that. So a few years ago, local newspapers said, well, if they're not keeping track of who the alleged abusers are in their religious denomination, why don't we create our own database? I think this was the Houston Chronicle and another newspaper. They started publishing articles about allegations of abuse by Southern Baptist preachers. And they were horrific, as you can expect. They were horrific. But one of the questions that came up is, how come so many of these people who are known alleged abusers, how come they get shuffled from church to church? How come there's no passing of information between these churches? And how come there's no central database of any of this stuff so that a pastor who runs one church in one state can do some sort of background check on why a dude was kicked out of another church? And the answer was always like, well, we can't just keep a list like that. It could be a liability for us, things like that. Well, one of the things that happened because of the pressure that was on the SBC a few years ago after these articles came out is that they decided to hire an independent group to do their own analysis, do an audit of the Southern Baptist Convention and figure out how we're doing when it comes to sexual abuse. Tell us the numbers. Tell us what we need to do better, which, okay, credit where it's due. That was the right thing for them to do. In 2022, that whole investigation was finally made public. And holy hell, it was as awful as you would imagine. What they found in that report is that more over the past decade, more than 250 Southern Baptist Convention staffers or volunteers had been, quote, charged with sex crimes against more than 700 victims. We also learned in that investigation that there was a private list of alleged predators that was not shared with member churches. And that private list, among like the higher ups, it included 703 abusers with 409 believed to be SBC affiliated. Like they knew who the bad guys were and they didn't share that information, which means you would think that allows a lot of these problems to continue going on. It was so bad that the Department of Justice said, we're investigating multiple SBC entities, not individuals, but like churches that didn't do enough to put a stop to this. That investigation is still ongoing. But that gives you an idea of how bad that report was. It said all these horrible things, and it just made the SBC look even worse in one way, and I guess better because they were releasing their own investigation into the matter. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to show you right here on page. This report was 288 pages. And I am going to show you here page 149. Okay, that's how far back we got to go to see this thing right here. And I'm going to make sure you could see all this because one of the things that was really damning in the report was that there were allegations of abuse of some of the top SBC officials. And this was in the report. Okay. So let me tell you the background here. The guy who was president of the SBC from 2008 to 2010 was our friend here, Johnny Hunt. And by the way, there is a question here. Was there a leadership change after all of that? Well, the Southern Baptist Convention elects a president every year. And usually they only have 1-year terms. Sometimes they will reelect someone, so they have 2-year terms. But it is constantly changing up. And that guy's not like the Pope. He's not infallible or anything like that. He's just the dude who oversees the SBC. Well, for 2 years, Johnny Hunt was the guy in charge. And I will get back to that in a bit. But let's read through these allegations together because holy crap, they are talking about a guy who ran the whole joint, okay? We were asked to examine allegations of abuse during the relevant time period. During the course of our investigation, a pastor and his wife came forward to report that former SBC President Johnny Hunt, who was the immediate past president at the time, had sexually assaulted the wife on July 25th, 2010. I know this is small print, so I'm going to get out of this mode for a second. They accused him of sexually assaulting the wife in July of 2010. That's like months after Johnny Hunt stepped down as president of the SBC. Okay? And what this allegation said, like, here's what should have happened. Johnny Hunt was president for 2 years of the SBC. Then, like the actual US president, after he's done with his term, he is now back to being a civilian. He can go back to his home church. He can become a pastor again and just go back to normal. Like you were elevated for a time and now you're back to your own church and you can run it. And that's fine. Johnny Hunt was supposed to do that. But he also decided he was going to take a sabbatical for a little while to, relax, get his mind off of work, which I understand. Okay. And during the sabbatical, he got to know this other pastor, unnamed, and this pastor's wife. Okay. So these people had a friendly relationship. The pastor and Johnny Hunt were friends for like 25 years. The pastor considered Johnny Hunt a mentor. And he also said in the allegation that Dr. Hunt, Johnny Hunt, groomed the couple with flattery and promises of help in ministry. And he also made some weird comments about the dude's wife, which was weird. Okay. Here's what they said in this report. I do want to show you this so you could see it for yourself because this is directly commenting from the couple themselves. They say that at the June 2010 annual meeting of the SBC, Dr. Hunt invited the couple to come spend some time with him and his family at Panama City Beach while he was on sabbatical for the month of July. Pastor and survivor, his wife, looked up to Dr. Hunt as a spiritual father figure. Okay, they took a short vacation to the beach. They stayed at a separate location, spent some time together. At one point, Dr. Hunt kissed the wife on the forehead and made inappropriate comments about her figure. Weird. Not a crime, not illegal, but definitely inappropriate. Okay. So anyway, this goes on for a while, but on another Saturday in July, the pastor texted Dr. Hunt and said, "Can you keep an eye out for my wife because she's going back to that place for a different event?" And check this out. When the pastor called about that issue, he was told to book a place for the wife directly on a website like Airbnb, similar to that. He didn't know it was right next door to Johnny Hunt's place. Yikes. And he called Dr. Hunt and said, "Hey, my wife's coming. Can you keep an eye on her?" And Dr. Hunt said, "Sure, I will." So, on July 25th, 2010, the woman drove to the beach and made several stops. The church to hear someone speak, her childhood home and the school, the first church her husband pastored, all fine, whatever. Upon arrival at the condo, the woman texted her husband and Dr. Hunt a picture of the ocean. She has arrived. Very nice. Dr. Hunt texted her asking what condo she was in. He knew. She responded with the number, and he replied, "It's right next door. Why don't you come out on the balcony?" So the two of them, the wife and Dr. Johnny Hunt, are on their respective balconies, and the woman realizes for the first time, "Oh, I'm right next door to the dude who was inappropriate to me not that long ago." Then Johnny Hunt comes over to her room. Actually, I'm sorry. Uh, he brought her a bottle of water. The woman recalled Dr. Hunt shifting the conversation from ministry to flattery about her appearance, her clothing, and her perfume. Dr. Hunt remarked that he was hot from being in the sun, and the woman said he could come sit in the shade on her balcony, like she's inviting him over to her room. They assume this is all friendly, and they continue the conversation. Dr. Hunt asked her if she felt safe. She said that she did, but that's a weird question to ask. He then told her to put her feet on his knee, and he touched them while commenting on their beauty and size. At one point, he said he was uncomfortable sitting outside because he didn't want anyone to notice, so they should go inside. At this point, he's kind of inviting himself into her bedroom. And what's she gonna do? Say no to this powerful dude? So Dr. Hunt pointed to the bedroom and said he guessed they didn't need to go in there. She objected by emphatically saying no. In the living room, he asked about ministry and church frustrations, and then he slid closer while the woman was telling a story of the stress that she and her husband were under at the church. He asked her more personal questions about her life, like, "Have you ever done anything like this before?" And if she was wild growing up. She didn't know what he was getting at. Okay, this is graphic. I am reading this. Dr. Hunt then moved towards the woman and proceeded to pull her shorts down, turn her over, and stare at her bare backside. He made sexual remarks about her body and things he imagined about her. During this time, Survivor felt frozen. Survivor said these were some of the longest moments of her life. She mustered the courage to ask him could she turn back over, and Dr. Hunt said yes. When she turned back over, she began to pull up her shorts. Dr. Hunt then pinned her to the couch, got on top of her, and pulled up her shirt. He sexually assaulted her with his hands and mouth. Suddenly, Dr. Hunt stopped and then stood up. Survivor pulled down her shirt. Survivor said she didn't want him to ruin his ministry, which to me says, like, dude, you don't want to do this. This is not going to end well for you. At which point he responded he did not want to ruin hers. But he then forced himself on her again by groping her, trying to pull her shirt down and violently kissing her. Survivor did not reciprocate, but rather stood eyes open and very stiff, hoping he would just stop and leave. He finally stopped and left. Okay, I'm done reading that. It's horrific. One of the things that is pointed out in this thing, and I just need to reiterate, This is in the SBC's internal report of all the shit that was going on in their purview in the sexual harassment investigation. That woman, by the way, she locked her door. She felt horrible. She didn't know what to do. Again, she's this woman who you would imagine in the SBC, she has been taught to keep silent, to not certainly speak out against a man. And this isn't just a man. This is the guy who was the president of the denomination not that long ago. So she said in this thing, she fought back tears. She felt overwhelmed. She said Dr. Hunt texted her, "Can you come back out on the balcony to kind of talk this out?" And he then said he would like to have sex with her 3 times a day. She went back inside her condo at that point. It was only the next morning that he apologized, that and she said she did not need. Sorry, I want to make sure I get this right. He apologized. He asked her to forgive him, and she said yes. He then asked if she had girlfriends that she would tell what happened. He told her not to mention what happened to anyone, and she said she wouldn't. And then maybe the weirdest, I mean, that was horrific, but one of the weirdest things about this is that these guys, all like Dr. Hunt, then said he was supposed to go back home to preach at his home church because his sabbatical was going to be over. But he then said, "You know what, everyone? I'm going to take a slightly longer sabbatical because I have physical and emotional exhaustion. I need a little more time off." And everyone was like, "Sure, Johnny, take some time off." Do you know what he did during that extended sabbatical? Apparently, he went through a secret restoration process that included counseling sessions. But wait, it wasn't just Johnny Hunt saying, "I need help and I need a Christian counselor to help me." No, no, no. The woman that he attacked and her husband went through counseling with him. All three of them did it together, which is so messed up. I don't know how they consented to that, but I guess they thought, well, we should be involved in this. And here's the thing. Here's one of the reasons I bring this up. This all happened in 2010. For 12 years, no one outside their small circle knew that any of this happened. The only reason the public knew about this is when it was published in the SBC report. And the thing is, that's 12 years where Johnny Hunt just continued with his life like nothing happened. He then went back to the pulpit at his church. He only retired in 2019, and then he became the senior vice president for the SBC's North American Mission Board. So he's training missionaries, and he's also preaching at churches all across the country, and he gets paid for that. It's a pretty sweet gig if you're a public speaker. Like, life is good when you're an alleged sexual abuser who belongs to a religious denomination with a history of ignoring sexual abuse. So no one knew any of this happened until 2022. And so let me cut to 2022. The report comes out. People find out what Johnny Hunt allegedly did. What does Johnny Hunt do? Well, first he denies everything. Then, using the problematic dude, step-by-step guidelines, he then says, "Okay, I did it, but it was all consensual." And then by the end of the year, he's like, "You guys, I need to go into Christian restoration again." And he completed it. And earlier this year, he was declared eligible to return to professional ministry, and he did. Earlier this year, he returned to the pulpit. So he's back to normal. Never any criminal charges filed against Johnny Hunt. His professional career never takes a hit. The SBC just didn't care. But here's what's staggering about this. This year, Johnny Hunt and his lawyers filed a defamation lawsuit against the Southern Baptist Convention. He said they ruined my life by including me in that report. He said, according to the lawsuit, the encounter, quote, involved only kissing and some awkward fondling. Infidelity, yes, but it was an assault. He also says, "I wasn't the SBC president at the time, just a civilian, so how dare you highlight what I allegedly did?" So he said including him in the report was nothing more, and I'm quoting here, "than a strategic decision to deflect attention from the SBC's historical failure to take aggressive steps to respond to reports of child sex abuse and other sex crimes in its past." And here's the thing. I mean, all of that's horrible, but all of that we knew if you follow this story for years. The thing that has happened is in the past week, or past 2 weeks anyway, this case is still ongoing, the defamation case. And his lawyers will say something, the other side responds back. But in one of the more recent responses, Johnny Hunt's lawyers said, "You guys, we can't dismiss this case. We have a legitimate case because," and I want to show you this. This is what his lawyers have argued in this article, and I'm going to share this right over here. Let's see if this can come up. This is from Religion News Service, which wrote an article about this. Pastor Hunt was not the president of the SBC or a member of the executive committee at the time of the incident. These are Johnny Hunt's lawyers saying why this case, it's legit because they shouldn't have included this passage about Hunt in the piece. They opposed the denomination's attempt to have the case dismissed. He was merely a private citizen whose marital fidelity was nobody else's business. His marital fidelity is nobody else's business. How is it not? He is a private citizen, fine, but he is a dude whose professional career, whose time at the head of the SBC, who has made it his life's mission to pretend and lie about how same-sex couples in consensual loving relationships are ruining everything. So when they're in a committed relationship, he says they're bad. They're bad for kids. It's not real marriage. But when he does something, in his case, he says infidelity. But in the survivor's case, she's saying no, sexual assault. That should be just ignored. That's not anyone else's business, according to Johnny Hunt. And here's the thing. This is not just me saying this. This is a guy who in 2017, Johnny Hunt signed something called the Nashville Statement. And you should Google that if you've never heard of it. But the Nashville Statement was basically a long laundry list of rules regarding like LGBTQ people that all these conservative Christians decided to sign on to. It said marriage could only be between a man and a woman, that all married couples needed to be monogamous, and that trans people didn't exist. Those are just three of the things. There were a lot more. Johnny Hunt signed that. You know, all married couples need to be monogamous. Let me sign my name there, guy who had already committed sexual assault, allegedly, according to that victim. He also signed something called the Statement on Marriage from the SBC's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which was written in response to the Supreme Court's Obergefell ruling that legalized marriage equality nationwide. And that statement said, you know, this decision is horrible, and it comes as a result of marriage's decline through divorce, cohabitation, and a worldview of almost limitless sexual freedom. He's saying same-sex marriage is legalized because we allow all these people to do all these things that go against what God wants. He signed that after he allegedly committed sexual assault. And maybe the best example of this, in 2008, at the same convention when Johnny Hunt was elected the president of the SBC executive committee condemned sexual abuse in all forms. And check this out. Here's what they wrote. I want to make sure you can see this. This was their statement. The Southern Baptist Convention is on record for having stood strongly against sexual abuse. We have long condemned those who would use our churches as a hunting ground for their own sick and selfish pleasure. At the same time, sexual abuse is a growing crisis in the nation. Like, not our fault, it's happening everywhere. ... Even though the number of Southern Baptist ministers who are sexual predators may seem to be relatively small, spoiler, it was not, we must be on watch and take immediate action against those who prey on the most innocent among us. One sexual predator in our midst is one too many. Gotta stop the sex predators. Anyway, let us introduce you to our new president, Johnny Hunt. That's the Southern Baptist Convention for you. That's Johnny Hunt for you. Like, if he wasn't an anti-LGBTQ preacher who made sexual ethics like the central focal point of everything he does, maybe this doesn't have to be a public story if it was infidelity. But when it's sexual abuse and you're a guy in charge of a whole denomination known for sexual abuse, it's absolutely a story. And also, I'm not a lawyer, but if you're going to say these people defamed me, part of defamation means they had to know this was false and they published it anyway. And it's hard to imagine the SBC knew that it didn't happen, but they decided to go forward with this anyway. I don't know how he has a case. Like, there are famous Christian hypocrites, Ted Haggard, Jerry Falwell Jr., but even those guys didn't commit assault. They were just hypocrites. Johnny Hunt wants to make sure everyone gets to hear about the shit he allegedly did to that woman. And by filing a defamation suit, it's just the Streisand effect on steroids right there. Just a horrible story, but also, I guess, thanks, Johnny Hunt, for talking about it so that we can keep talking about it, because otherwise this might have gone under the radar for people who don't follow this stuff. So that's Johnny Hunt for you. I'll pause there. Let's talk about any questions here. And how did the husband go through this without beating his ass? That is a very good question. Here's the thing. I don't know who that husband is. I don't know what he was. I will say, I mean, as I said before, he looked up to Johnny Hunt. I don't know what the pastor was thinking, but I imagine he's like, well, if Johnny Hunt did something and he says it was consensual, like, I could totally see this pastor putting some blame on his wife. I don't know. I hope not, but it's plausible. But I imagine he doesn't really hold Johnny Hunt in low regard, unfortunately. I don't know. I don't know who it is. What are some of the other questions we have? Have more allegations come out? Not against Johnny Hunt, to my knowledge. There has been more of a reckoning in the SBC, but that's still ongoing, because the question is, if there are these allegations, one, what's the SBC going to do? Are they going to make sure those people don't get jobs at other churches? But also, are more people going to file lawsuits? And part of that depends on whether statutes of limitations have run out. Some of that depends on whether not everyone wants to dredge up these memories. So, but the SBC is they're still on the hook for this. People are still associating them, as they should, with looking the other way when it comes to sexual assault allegations. And the fact that it happened to one of their top leaders is both not surprising and also very predictable. I don't know. Some of these churches should have warnings about rapists in the pulpits. Yeah, they need warning signs outside a lot of these churches that if you bring your kids here, you may want to keep them at close proximity to you. That the danger is coming from inside the house, not from public schools, not from gay people, not from trans people. And here's the thing. If pastors who don't do this sort of thing, if they're not the ones leading the charge against this stuff, you get into the whole good cop, bad cop thing. Like, oh, this guy was a bad police officer. He beat up these people. He's horrible. But everyone else are the good cops. Well, guess what? If they didn't speak out against that dude, but they knew about it, no, they're all bad cops. And that's the thing. Like, if pastors aren't going to speak out against this stuff and condemn their brothers and sisters in the ministry who are doing this sort of thing and they know about it, then they're not any better. So very disturbing. It is on brand, says Rebecca, for Southern Baptists. Both my youth director and music minister, who lead the purity culture charge, were cheating on their wives. Like, again, Rebecca, I'm sorry you had to go through that, but that's the thing. It's the hypocrisy of the thing. I genuinely don't care what these people do in their private lives. It's not my business. But when they preach one thing and then pin the blame on other people for doing this sort of thing, that should bug all of us. It's the hypocrisy of all of this. It's very disturbing. Hey, Heaven, new subscriber here. Love your content. Thank you so much, Mailman. I appreciate that. If there are any other comments or questions, otherwise I will get to the next story. Hey, Hemet, heard you like musicals. I have a question. Will you watch a musical that criticizes all three Abrahamic religions? I feel like this is a joke, and I don't know what the punchline is here. That sounds very intriguing, though. You know what? I'm going to New York very soon, and I'll hopefully get to watch a show, and I'm very excited about that because haven't been able to go to Broadway in forever. That would be very, very exciting. Only 499 more stories to go. I do have a lot of tabs open. Don't worry, I won't spend as much time on some of these other ones because There's only a couple that I really wanted to spend some time talking about. Okay, let's talk about a brand new poll that just came out. And I'm going to show you the headline here because I stared at it for a long time trying to make sense of it. I am not sure I'm any closer to making sense of it, but we'll talk about it. Here we go. This is the headline. It's from the Utah-based Deseret News. There we go, Deseret News. And they conducted a poll with a reputable polling agency. And they basically asked a lot of registered voters. They only asked registered voters, do you see the following people, politicians, as people of faith? And you could see from the headline, Republicans see Trump as a person of faith, more so than Mitt Romney, Mike Pence, and others. Like, you've got to be kidding me there. Let me tell you some of the numbers here. Among Republicans, 53% of registered voters who are Republican said Trump was a person of faith. And he's number one on the list for them. Mike Pence, like, who's famously Christian to the point where he's really weird about it and has to go on the Republican debate stage and brag about how he sleeps with his wife, he came in at 52%. Only 52% of registered Republicans think Mike Pence is a person of faith. Like, I don't know anything else about Mike Pence other than he's a person of faith. Who are these people who are like, I don't know? And interestingly enough, what else is on this list? The Republicans also said Ron DeSantis, 47%, Tim Scott, 31%, Nikki Haley, 31%, Vivek Ramaswamy, 30%, Chris Christie, 22%. This is incredible. When it came to Republicans, registered Republican voters, only 23% of them said Joe Biden is a person of faith. And only 12% said Kamala Harris is a person of faith. Like, this is not up for debate. It's definitely not up for debate when it comes to Joe Biden. Joe Biden is Catholic, no questions here, famously. So he attends Mass just about every week. There's been entire news cycles about whether or not bishops should be giving him communion because he supports pro-choice public policy, regardless of what he thinks about abortion in his private life. So if only 23% of Republican voters think Joe Biden is a person of faith, what the hell is going on with 77% of voters? Are they either uninformed about Joe Biden's religion? Do they think Catholicism doesn't count? Or are they just so brainwashed by like Fox News stuff that they're like, Biden is a Democrat. He supports liberal everything. Therefore, he must not be religious or something like that. While we're at it, Kamala Harris is Baptist. Ron DeSantis is Catholic. Vivek Ramaswamy is Hindu. And again, Mike Pence is Mike Pence. But again, going back to Donald Trump here, we can have a discussion about whether or not Donald Trump is religious. And I've heard some people accuse him of being an atheist, and it's like, no, don't put him in my camp. He hasn't put any thought into God. But Donald Trump, just to remind everyone, because you don't remember, he is a thrice married racist who paid hush money to porn stars he was having affairs with when his current wife was pregnant with his fifth child. He is a sexual abuser. He is the guy who said 2 Corinthians. He's the guy who got caught bragging about non-consensually grabbing women, which he could because he said he was a celebrity. He's a guy who lies about everything. He's a guy who says he doesn't need forgiveness. He's a guy who, in 2015, when he was running for president and reporter said, oh, what's your favorite Bible verse? He basically was like, all of them. I can't name my favorite. That was his response then. And of course, he is the guy who took this picture that I know you all remember right here, standing in front of a church after his team wiped the streets away of protesters so he could get this photo op in front of a church in Washington, D.C. That's Donald Trump's religion for you. That's the guy who 53% of Republican voters say he's a man of faith. That should disturb everybody. Like, what the hell? Of all the things you could call Donald Trump, and there are so many things you could call Donald Trump, devout is not one of them. There isn't a single white evangelical church in America that would allow someone like Trump to be their pastor if they wanted to be taken seriously. But again, half of these Republican voters, many of whom I assume are conservative Christians, seriously think he's a person of faith. I mean, I know it's not because he does the things you're supposed to do as a Christian. I know it's not because he's put any thought into theology. If he worships anybody, it's himself. Like, I would assume here. So I'm trying to rationalize this now. Why would they say that? The only reason anyone would seriously think Donald Trump is a person of faith is because Trump tells them he's a person of faith and they believe it. Like, they buy the pandering. Or maybe it's because they think installing right-wing justices on the Supreme Court for political purposes is the equivalent of accepting the divinity of Christ, which I thought was kind of the prerequisite. But yeah, what do I know? I'm an atheist. Like, if you're a pastor, you should be ashamed of yourself at this point. Pastors, by and large, have done such a horrible job of defining what it means to be a Christian that half of Republican voters think Trump falls under the umbrella. Like, if Trump is in your club, you need to be running for the exits, or at least that's what you would do if you had dignity. Um, it's so disturbing. By the way, I don't want to let Democrats entirely off the hook here. Among Democrats, 14% of Democrats said Donald Trump is a person of faith, which who the hell are those 14% of Democrats? 63% of Democrats said Joe Biden is a person of faith, which again, that's less than 2/3. What the hell, Democrats? How do you not know he's a person of faith? And this is mind-boggling. Let me show you this. This is part of the same survey here. Look at this bottom row. Mitt Romney. And they published this because Mitt Romney is from Utah, the senator from Utah. Only 35% of Republicans said he was a person of faith. I mentioned that earlier. But only 38% of Democrats said Mitt Romney was a person of faith and 42% of independents. Is that because they just don't know Mitt Romney's a Mormon? Or is it because they don't think Mormonism qualifies as a real faith? Or is it because, and this may be the best explanation I can possibly offer, the best case scenario here, most people do not pay any attention to anything involving politics. So when you ask them, oh, what do you think about Mitt Romney when it comes to this thing? They're like, I have no answer. I don't know. I guess not. Like, that just sounds right to them. I assume that's what's going on. Most people are just ignorant. And I don't blame people who are ignorant. They got other things going on in their lives. But still, for the people who know, the people who follow politics, that's just culty answers, just very delusional thinking. Or, I mean, here's the alternative proposal. Maybe they think someone like Donald Trump, whose entire, career has been spewing bullshit, that to them looks exactly like a pastor. How's that for you? Maybe that's the best case scenario. They're like, well, yeah, same dude. He lies. My pastor lies. Same thing. I think the takeaway here is that a whole bunch of Republicans think Trump is a person of faith, which just makes you question what they think faith is. I mean, the fact that he can get away with that Trump can get away with that and let people think he's pious, given everything he's done, it's the stranglehold he has on Republican voters. It's wild, and it's messed up that anyone would think that. Oh, what questions do we have? I guess the poll didn't ask what faith. I know. I wish they had done follow-up questions or like, why do you think he's religious? I wish I knew. I could easily see Trump as having faith in his own cult of personality. Totally fair point. And they didn't ask. They didn't do the follow-up. I wish, by the way, they did not publish the like line items and the breakdowns of every single demographic here like some pollsters do. I wish they did. Maybe they're saving that for a future story, but we only got the top line numbers in that Deseret News article, which is disappointing. Oh, that's easy. They've conflated Christianity with the Republican Party. You posted the articles about Baptists complaining about Jesus quotes being woke yourself. That is true. A lot of Baptists, if you quote things that Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, care for the least of these. We should feed the hungry, care for the poor. A lot of conservative Christians would be like, whoa, we would never do that. That's what wokeists do. But that's the thing. They've conflated Christianity with the Republican Party, and they've conflated Donald Trump with Jesus, which again, who do you get more upset at? The cultists who are always going to do that sort of thing, or the pastors who are too afraid to say, stop worshiping Trump. We don't stand. He doesn't stand for anything we stand for. So we need to stop putting our support behind someone like that. I'm not saying that as an endorsement, but when it comes to values, pastors could always speak about values from the pulpit. And the fact that so many of them are too cowardly to do it, again, they are part of the problem. They are complicit in this, and they should be ashamed of themselves. The faith they are talking about has more to do with Q than Jesus. Seriously, there are so many. I mean, there was an article in the New York Times, maybe it was last year, about a conservative Christian pastor who wanted to talk about Jesus, but his culty congregation just wanted him to talk about culture war issues and Trumpy type of things. And it got to the point where this pastor was driven out of his own church because he didn't even recognize who his church was anymore. And this goes to the heart of that. If these people put more faith in Trump or QAnon or whatever conspiracy theories they want, don't pretend you actually care about Jesus. You don't. You're not doing any of that. Any other questions here? All right, I'm going to move on. Oh, you're going to love this story. Did you all know Kevin Sorbo has written a book? He wrote a book. I'm going to show you the book right here. Kevin Sorbo, who is the actor who played Hercules in the 90s and is now just a MAGA cultist who says dumb things on Twitter. He just published this book, I think at the end of August. It's called The Test of Lionhood. And I'm going to tell you what it's about. It's about a lion. He's a little boy, but he has to grow up and overcome obstacles to become a man. But that cover kind of tells you everything. Here's the thing I want you to look at really carefully when it comes to this cover. Look at the credits here. Look at the credits. Who wrote the book? It's Kevin Sorbo and Brave Books. And listen, as an author, if you were an author, one, you only want your name on the book. The only way you would put someone else's name on the book is if they wrote it with you, or you are willing to give them credit because they did the bulk of the work, but you're the celebrity. So you might say like Kevin Sorbo with this ghostwriter or with this other writer. Or if it's a ghostwriter, it'll be your name, but we all know there was a ghostwriter involved. I have never seen this before where it's the famous person's name and then the publishers are listed there too. And I want to talk about that for a second. But one of the reasons this is interesting is because Brave Books does this all the time. I'm going to show you something else here. This is the collection of Brave Books' books. And I'm going to scroll in here. Check out what they got. They got a book by Kirk Cameron and Brave Books. Who is this one? By Elizabeth Johnson, the activist mommy, and Brave Books. I don't know who the Hodge twins are. I feel like that's a right-wing twins that I've never heard of. I've escaped that rabbit hole, but same deal. Elephants are not. I'm just squeezing down, scrolling down here. Who else? Dana Lash from the NRA. She's done this. Dan Crenshaw. He's the congressman with the eye patch from Texas, who's a Republican who tries to be the cool Bill Maher type of Republican, but he's just as culty as all the rest of them. And do we have any more? Oh, Jack Posobiec, who's just this right-wing troll. So again, you get the idea. This is what Brave Books does. They partner with right-wing celebrities. They slap the celebrity's name on the book and they put their own name on the book. Okay, there's nothing illegal about that, but interesting. So why did Kevin Sorbo, who's the most recent of these authors, why did he write a book? And here's the thing. I have a theory as to why he wrote this book. One, I don't think he actually wrote the book. I don't know how much he contributed to it. And we'll get to that in a second. But the other reason is he has no real movies to promote because no one's casting this guy in anything. He's a washed up actor from the 90s whose only way to generate attention these days is saying inflammatory things on Twitter. And then if he says something genuinely inflammatory, maybe right-wing media outlets will bring him on to talk about the same things, right? That's kind of what he does. But the thing is, when you write a book, now you're giving everyone a reason to have you on their show. So that's what I think this is about. Kevin Sorbo gets to slap his name on this book, and then he gets to go on TV, ostensibly to publicize the book. He gets to hold it up in front of the camera and say, guys, I wrote a book. But really, it's just a chance for him to get in front of the camera and say whatever the hell he wants to say. And I want to show you what he has said in interviews. So, like, here's a thing from the Christian Post. I'm going to show you. Let's see if I could pull this up here. Oh my God. This is the headline from the Christian Post. Kevin Sorbo writes new children's book to expose dangers of woke gender confusion. Here he is holding his book that he's so proud of, all 37 words of it or whatever it is. But look at this part down here, because like you would imagine a lot of this article is about what's this book about. And check it out. You get a paragraph on that. Lucas, who is the lion, has to build up some courage, getting past all these different obstacles to get past the fear. It's really about letting boys become boys to hopefully become men, strong providers for families as they grow up. Let's see what else he has to say about the book. All the craziness that's going on with what we're doing to kids right now in public schools. We have to let kids be kids and let them grow up. That has nothing to do with the book. That's just right-wing bullshit when it comes to like grooming teachers or whatever. Sorbo said it's dangerous to teach children that men and women can swap sexes at will, which is a thing he just made up because no one does that, or that children can be whichever gender they choose. Again, it's not a choice. No one is telling kids, flip a coin, that's what you are that day. But again, this is why he's written the book. It's so he could say stuff like this and get quoted. The danger is trying to make them the same. We're not the same. It's like these transgenders, which is not a word, going in and racing against women in sports now, boxing matches. It's just crazy to me. Yes, this is why the transgenders win every gold medal in all the Olympics. But that's just one outlet. That's just one outlet. Let me show you what he did in Fox News, because he's playing this game everywhere. Here we go. Come on. There we go. This is Fox News Digital. Notice how much they talk about his book, because that is what this article is about. Let boys be boys, let girls be girls, and let's stop chopping down men. There's a mention of the book in the subtitle, but again, that's not why he's doing this. If I scroll down here, there he is giving a Hercules pose. There you go. Okay. Here's the entirety of what the article says about the kids' book. The Test of Lionhood, out on Tuesday, August 29th from Brave Books, takes on these issues in an entertaining way for children. But beyond the pages of the book, Sorbo says he's quite worried about what's going on in the culture. They spent like that much space talking about the book. And look at how long this article is. And this is just Sorbo talking about whatever grievances he has. It just goes on forever. Because again, that's the point of all this. It's to just let him complain about trans people. By the way, he did this on Newsmax too. I'll show you this one last headline, this one last portion right here. This is what he said on Newsmax. But still, Sorbo said, I want boys to become strong men who lead their families and communities. This takes nothing away from women's equality. Women just have a different role in the family, and I think you need both a man and a woman raising a family. So one, women get in the kitchen is what he's saying, and also gay people, you're not the best at raising families. That's what he's getting at. So Kevin Sorbo wrote a children's book. Not because he has any talent in writing, but because he needed to slap his name on something so he could get in media outlets like those, get on TV, and then just complain about whatever it is he wants to complain about. That's what this is all about. That's what all of those authors for Brave Books are doing. They're all just getting their name on a book that they have nothing to do with. By the way, do you know how hard it is to write a children's book that is good? Like, if you think about the children's books you remember from your childhood, the ones that have stood the test of time, there is something special about them. It is not easy to write a children's book. It's arguably way harder to write a children's book than writing a novel or a work of nonfiction, because you have to be economical with your words and have these memorable characters that kids can relate to. And I promise, none of you have heard of a single one of those Brave books. None of you have read them. None of you would read them because there's nothing memorable about them. I do want to show you one more thing, though, because I don't think Brave Books realizes this is out here. This is a job website. This is from 2 years ago. But this is from the lead writer at Brave Books, who was posting something saying they were looking to hire an author to write books for them. And if you look at this, I work for Brave Books, a children's book publishing company. Our goal, I don't care. We've published books, I don't care. We're hiring a staff writer to join our novel writing team. They don't have novels, they just have kids' books. Asking applicants to enter via a writing contest. Our company is an example of the shared universe publisher. So all the books are involved in the same fictional universe. Every picture book we released was written with a different author, a celebrity, who functions as a co-author with our team. Our customers are willing to subscribe to all of these picture books because they trust us and love our characters. They don't. They just see the celebrity's name and then someone complaining about trans people on Fox News, and they're like, I'll buy what you're selling. My point here is they hire people to write these books, like on the DL. Their names don't get publicized, but then they'll slap a right-wing celebrity's name on someone else's work, and that's why on the cover it says Kevin Sorbo and Brave Books. That's what's going on here. But really, here's the other part of this. When Kirk Cameron published his kids' book, yes, he got the media outlets to cover it. And yes, he got to talk about how much he hates gay people and all that stuff. But the other thing he did is he would say, I'm doing a reading in a public library. And it would be like a smaller library that seats 100 people. And then like 300 people would come to his event because it's Kirk Cameron and he has reach. And then the library would say, you can't have that many people here. It's a fire hazard. We need you to leave. Or you are saying stuff, you're spreading misinformation about our library, so we can't have you hold the event here. And then he claims that that is Christian persecution, and that drives another news cycle, and that sells more books. So that's what I think Kevin Sorbo is doing here. My buddy Joe Jervis, who writes the website Joe My God, he actually published an article about Kevin Sorbo's book, and this is how he titled it. Actor Kevin Sorbo issues anti-LGBTQ children's book. And for all the reasons I already mentioned to you, yeah, it's an anti-LGBTQ book. It's not that the book says trans people are bad, but actually, if you look in that Christian Post article, as Joe mentions here, look at this. At the end of the tale, a few pages are reserved for scripture and what the Bible says about the gender roles God has designed for men and women. It's not that the book says trans people are bad or gay people are bad, but they are winking at you and saying the same thing and pointing to Bible verses that are like the clobber verses. And of course, whenever Kevin Sorbo talks about the book on TV or in media, he is saying anti-LGBTQ stuff. So it is fair to call this an anti-LGBTQ book. So what did Kevin Sorbo do after that post? Kevin Sorbo issued this X/tweet. He posted to Joe's article and he wrote, yet another example of the left doing whatever it takes to score clicks while bashing Christian conservatives. This guy has no clue what he's talking about and only furthers narrative that most journalists are a joke. My book, The Test of Lionhood, is about a lion who learns what it means to be courageous and brave, haha, shout out to the publisher, while on a dangerous adventure to save his sister cub. Which, by the way, that's the sort of description you give when you haven't read your own book. I guess books that don't include LGBTQ characters are automatically anti-LGBTQ. Again, it's not anti-gay because it doesn't have gay characters. It's anti-gay because we totally know you're being anti-gay about it. That's why you have the Bible verses in there. That's why you're saying everyone needs to conform to gender norms. And that's why you're doing every interview bashing LGBTQ people when talking about this book. That's why it's anti-LGBTQ. And of course, Kevin Sorbo is very mad about that. I don't know. I can't imagine anyone seriously reading this book to their kids and enjoying it. I hope they're not. That would be disturbing as hell, but hopefully they'll do better. I know, $22 for a kid's book. That was the price for the Kevin Sorbo book, and that's like almost $1 a word in that book. Like, come on. No one buys a kid's book for $22. You pay $22 if you think like 90% of this is going into the Trump reelection / I need to pay my lawyer's account or something like that. It's just, my book, which has more words, is not $22. It's $14. It's ridiculous. Gosh, I wonder what Elephants Are Not Birds is about. Yep, that's one of the Brave books. And yeah, again, they would say that's not an anti-trans book, even though we know what they're getting at. Just ridiculous. I kind of want to read some of those just to see how messed up they are. You know what? So I read about, I think, somewhere between half and 75% of the Kevin Sorbo book because samples of it are online. If you Google the name of the book, you can find websites, or maybe it's the Amazon search through or whatever it is. You can read these books. And again, what makes me mad is that they're just not that interesting. It's the bare minimum. It's, by the way, can I mention that Kevin Sorbo's book here, his book that is clearly anti-trans and all of that, this is the main character. This is the lion. This is Lucas the lion. And his whole Kevin Sorbo thing is like, we need to make sure men are men and women are women. And I'm going to do that by showing you this bear who is wearing jeans and a flannel and a vest and standing upright on two legs. Also, trans people shouldn't have rights, says Kevin Sorbo, because God made you a certain way and you need to stick with that. Like, come on. You're not even good at being a bigot. What is he doing? $22 for that. And holding a doll. Yeah. And I think he loses the doll, or maybe that was his sister's doll. I'm not sure. It wasn't a good book. It wasn't memorable. And again, I've read so many kids' books because I have some and I had to read them. And I had to read these books to them. And some of them can get very annoying and repetitious. But also, it's easy to see why the old books that you might still have heard of are memorable. This is not. No one's going to be talking about this in a week or two whenever this stops making news, because Kevin Sorbo has, like, he's done with all the anti-trans stuff. Any other questions there? I will move on otherwise to the very next story. Sorry, I'm just running through my tabs here. You know what? I'm going to skip that one for now. Let's talk. I'm debating which one. Nope, we're going to do this one. This is a headline that I saw on the website First Liberty. It's one of those right-wing legal groups. And basically, the story here, Arizona school board sued by member for censoring scripture reading at meetings, which should raise us so many red flags, because why would a school board member be reading scripture at meetings? So let's talk about what's actually going on here, because I had to investigate this, right? So here's the story. Arizona has a school district, the Peoria Unified School District. And there's a member there, Heather Rooks, Rooks. So Heather Rooks is one of the board members there. And she joined the board back in January. And there's a section of the board meetings that allows board members a chance to say whatever's on their minds. And sometimes they'll commemorate a holiday, draw attention to issues faced by the district, congratulate students. It's all well and good. Whenever they get to Rook's turn to speak what's on her mind, she always opens up these meetings, or her section of those comments, by citing a Bible verse. So, for example, in February, she began her remarks citing Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Train up a child, which, as I'm sure many of you know, is a verse that has been used to justify child abuse. She could say that's not what she was doing there, but also, really, that's the verse you're opening your remarks with? And she just reads out that verse and then continues on like nothing ever happened. In March, she was at a meeting where she cited 1 Corinthians, be on guard, stay awake, stay firm in your faith, be brave, be strong. And at that point, when she said this stuff, even the chair of the board piped in to say, like, what are you doing? You can't do that. He said, our attorneys have told you that reciting scripture at board meetings goes against the Establishment Clause. And they also said, you don't have like First Amendment rights here because you are speaking as a member of a public governing body, not as an individual. So like her lawyers at the district were like, stop it. She did not stop it. And in fact, by May, one of the other school board members, Rebecca Hill, started quoting from the Bible as well. And she quoted a verse that says, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble in sin by leading him away from my teaching, It would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Rebecca Hill read that verse, which has been used to suggest that if anyone's gay or trans or an atheist, they should be executed. And Rooks followed that up with her own reference to another passage from 1 Corinthians. Again, this goes on for a while. The executive director of the Secular Coalition for Arizona spoke up at a meeting over the summer. And during the public comment section, she literally apologized to the public. She said, "I'm saying this as a caring adult in the room. I apologize that last month one of the board members called for your eradication." She said that to all the non-evangelicals in the audience. Anyway, so this is Heather Rooks. And back in May, the Freedom from Religion Foundation sent a letter to the district basically saying, "What are you people doing there?" And they sent it to David Sandoval, who's the president of the board. I should say there are 5 members of the board. 2 of them are doing this Bible reading thing. And FFRF basically told them, "Look, you're government officials. You cannot be allowed to commandeer the board in order to impose your personal religious beliefs on everybody else." FFRF pointed out they sued another school district for doing something similar in California, and that district had to pay out more than $200,000 when all was said and done. So what happened? This was written in May. What happened at the very next meeting? Take a guess. Take a guess. Heather Rooks didn't care. She cited a verse from Ephesians and just carried on. And here's the thing. By July, Rooks said she would stop doing it and she would have her attorneys at First Liberty handle this matter. So there were like a couple of months where she stopped doing that. She's still a bad board member. She's still making crazy decisions, which I'll tell you about. But she was like, "Fine, I'll stop for now. I will let my conservative Christian lawyers decide what to do next." And you can take a wild guess what her conservative Christian lawyers have told her to do. And by the way, check this out. This is their lawsuit that they are now filing. Here we go. Heather Rooks versus the whole school district. And she's basically suing them for telling her not to quote the Bible at meetings. And in a sense, she's like suing the district before Freedom from Religion Foundation can sue the district for allowing her to say those things. So this lawsuit, which is like 28 pages, it says Heather Rooks deserves absolute legislative immunity for reciting the Bible at meetings in case FFRF sues. She wants a judge to rule that her Bible readings are legal. She wants money for damages and attorney's fees and for herself. And what's interesting is that this lawsuit basically argues that she is no different from anybody else. Like, look at the beginning of this lawsuit. It cites President Biden referencing the Bible. President Lincoln is there. President George Washington. Like, yeah, presidents do this. And look at this. Heather Rooks isn't a famous historical figure or a household name, but she too wants to be part of the long-standing tradition of government officials solemnizing public occasions in this way. She is not a president. She is not Congress. And here's the thing. As we have seen with invocation prayers, the courts across the board have repeatedly said there is a key difference between, say, Congress or a legislature or a city council having opening prayers and school boards doing the same thing. Why? Because there are children involved at school board meetings. Kids are often present at those meetings. They are there. That means those gatherings are basically school-sponsored events. It's illegal. That's why it's illegal for administrators and employees to push their faith on kids, even if, like Heather Rooks, you're not openly trying to proselytize. Like, of course, schools can study this stuff. They can study Bible verses for academic reasons. That's not what this is about. But this idea that she is no different from a president or a member of Congress who delivers invocations, that's just BS because courts do not see it that way. That's why this lawsuit shouldn't go anywhere. Even Joe Kennedy, that football coach from Bremerton that we've talked about in the past, even the Supreme Court said, okay, you can pray at midfield after football games, but only after the whistle has blown, so the game is over, and only when you're not on the clock doing stuff for your team. because even this Supreme Court said, if you're on the clock working as a football coach hired by the school district, you can't do that. You're allowed to do it, even if it's public, at midfield, they said, like when you're not on the clock. But Heather Rooks doesn't get that. She thinks she is no different than like George Washington, which makes no sense at all. And here's the thing. If she wants to pray, she can pray. No one is stopping her. She could do it while driving to a meeting. She can pray silently while everyone else is speaking. She could do it during a bathroom break. She could do it while sitting on the toilet. Like, is her God so weak that he can't hear the prayers unless she says it at the beginning of public comment time at the board meetings? Like, there's nothing in the Bible that says prayers have to be delivered publicly in order to count. In fact, if Heather Rooks ever read the Bible, she would know that there are verses in Matthew specifically condemning that, but she hasn't read it. She just cherry picks verses. I did ask the Secular Coalition for Arizona about this. Did they have any response to the lawsuit? And here's what they told me. She can't separate church from state. She can't separate herself from her role as a school board member, and she can't separate fact from fiction. And they went on for a while, but they said this lawsuit is an attempt to force her religion onto children against the wishes of their parents. Religion should be taught at home by the parents, not at a public school board meeting by an unrelated person. And by the way, I told you I would mention this. Heather Rooks, outside of the prayer thing, like, she's not a good board member regardless. According to the Secular Coalition for Arizona, which has tracked her for all year long, here's what I learned about her. At the district slogan begins every student, every day. And she always adds in there, except the girls, because this district has trans inclusive policies and she thinks that violates girls' rights and their safety. She also follows neo-Nazi social media accounts. Heather Rooks whined about a promotional video all about the district's history of racial diversity and inclusion because she said they made it all about race. She opposed social workers in the district traveling to an out-of-state conference, even though it was funded entirely by outside grant money, because that conference had anti-racism sessions. She said that the district, which is looking for a new superintendent, she said that one of the qualifications needed to be love of country, as if like pseudo-patriotism needed to be something a superintendent needs. And maybe the most crazy thing, Microsoft had its charity arm say, we want to offer your students free computer science classes. Like, we'll pay for the teachers, we'll pay for the equipment, whatever. We want to make sure your kids are good at working with computers. And she rejected that program. Why? Because Microsoft boasts about its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's just hurting the kids in the district. Now, the good news is there are 3 sane people in the district on the board who outnumber her and her colleague. But as we all know, like, that can change very quickly as right-wing groups mobilize to take over school boards. So I hope it lasts, but I don't know how long it will. I can tell you this defamation, this case against the school district for not letting her speak about the Bible, that's not going to go anywhere. That's just a waste of everyone's time. I will leave that there for now. What other questions are we doing for this section? Why is it that those who constantly accuse others of not abiding by the Constitution never seem to have never read the Constitution? Touche. I mean, yeah, they all want to obey the Constitution. They don't know what how the First Amendment has been interpreted. It's the same thing as like all these conservatives quote Martin Luther King, like, let's judge people by the content of their character. And they've never read the rest of that speech. And they've never read letters from a Birmingham jail. Like, they only always know like the one little thing that gets repeated, and they never know the context because none of them actually read any of this stuff. But it's a fair point. Do you want to chime in on the frivolous sanction discussions? Which ones are we talking about there, Dan? If you can point me to what we are talking about, I'll comment on that. You can't sue for being prohibited from doing something illegal. That is frivolous nonsense. I think that's the right answer. And I hope the judges see it that way too. If frivolous, could they be sanctioned? If it is a frivolous lawsuit, I don't know that the board can do anything to her. Like, she's filing this in her personal capacity. If it's dismissed, she's still on the board. They can't really do anything about it until she is voted out. So I don't think anything can really happen to her. But if there is a resolution to that case, it could stop her from at least saying this stuff, because now she can be sued. And now we would know she could be sued. I'm sure FFRF is watching that case closely. We'll see. Why is there still a prayer in Congress? That is a wonderful question. And I don't know. I mean, the answer is no one actually wants to vote to get rid of it. It's just one of those, it's innocuous. No one really cares. But I promise you, if there was a vote, even if Democrats took over the House and there was a vote to get rid of the invocation prayer, it would just be weeks of headlines on Fox News about how Democrats hate God and they want to take God out of everything. And the question is it worth it to Democrats to get rid of a tradition that is clearly a dumb tradition? I kind of see it like John Fetterman deciding to wear a suit this week. Like, it's not the hill you want to die on. And it's ridiculous that anyone's making a big deal about it. But even Fetterman's like, fine, I'll wear a stupid suit. This isn't the thing I'm going to get hung up on. And that might be the case with the invocation prayers in Congress. It's like, yeah, no one really wants it. I'm sure Democrats could figure out a good reason not to go through the invocation. But as far as the things you want to do when you're in power, that's probably very low on the priority list. And the possibility of backlash is huge. So they're not going to do it. Any other questions there? All right, I'm going to jump. Oh my God. Let's talk about this story. Let's talk about the Garlic family. Funny name, not a funny situation. And I'm showing you this right here, which is this is a GoFundMe page I'm going to show you that this family posted sometime last year. The Garlic Family Ministry Van. And here's the thing about this thing. If you look on this GoFundMe page, this family set up last year, this guy on the right, his name is Benjamin Garlic, and his wife is Chantal. They said they needed God's help to purchase a van for their traveling ministry. The one you see in the picture has like 418,000 miles on it, and it's not big enough to hold their 5 kids and the newborn who is in the baby seat in the front seat. So they needed a new van. They were trying to raise money for this thing. And they pointed out, we are calling on you, our faithful supporter and prayer warrior, to help us raise the money for this vehicle before that deadline expires. They wanted $40,000. They raised, as you could see, about $18,000. But okay. And by the way, a lot of the contributions were large anonymous donations of like $1,000, $2,000, $4,000. So like that's just a few donations of a lot of money. But okay, whatever. They can have their GoFundMe. Who cares? That's not a big deal. And the reason they need this van to do the traveling ministry is because what Benjamin Garlic does is he goes across the South and the southeastern part of the country, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, Arkansas, just like his late father did. And he delivers sermons often in Spanish to a Spanish-speaking audience. And what I found interesting in this GoFundMe page, I'm going to scroll down here because, you can't see this anymore, but I will show it to you. One of the things that surprised me, let's see if you could see this here. It's not there anymore because the GoFundMe has been shut down. But I saw this on the GoFundMe page. Someone donated $5 recently. And I think the only reason this person, Marie, donated $5 is so she could leave a comment. And if you look at this, it's a warning to other people not to donate to this GoFundMe. Benjamin Garlic faces the majority of the charged offenses. He is accused of some horrible stuff. I'll get back to the horrible stuff in a second. But basically, someone made a donation just to warn other people. And that's where it's just messed up. So according to this story, that ministry had to come to a halt this month because both Garlics were arrested. They were arrested on 14 separate charges involving child rape and abuse. And the docket says the violations date back to February of 2021. So this couple was arrested and both of them are gone. They were both charged with this stuff. And if you look at the docket here, it's horrific. Look at this. This is Benjamin Garlic here. Don't make me read that. You could just see it right there. It's multiple counts of aggravated sexual assault, battery. His wife is there too, for aggravated rape, facilitating that, and also um, aggravated child abuse. Horrible stuff. Like, and again, what we don't know right now is who their victims were. I am afraid because there were 5 counts of aggravated rape of a child and 5 counts of aggravated battery, my assumption is that we were talking about the couple's kids, the 5 girls who were in that GoFundMe page in that picture. I don't know that. The only other option then is it's 5 other victims from somewhere else. None of that is okay. But basically, the charges also suggest the mother knew about this and she didn't do enough to put a stop to it. That said, I do want to point out that according to local news reports, the wife filed for an order of protection against her husband last month. I don't know if that's related to these charges. They were arrested after she filed for that order of protection. Based on state law, though, in Tennessee, if Benjamin is found guilty, he faces imprisonment for life without the possibility of parole. One of the local news reporters actually visited his Spanish-speaking ministry at a building that he rents out in the city of Murfreesboro. And there was an eviction notice on the door. It's from last month, and it said Benjamin Garlic had not paid the rent. He had until the end of this month to vacate the premises. And I don't think he'll be able to pay rent now because he's probably either he's behind bars or he's out on bond or something like that. I do want to point out that Benjamin and his wife are not drag queens. They're just Christian pastors who did this horrific thing. They'll have their day in court soon. They already had just this week the meeting where the judge tells them what the official charges are and they can enter their pleas. But this will go to court later on and we'll see what happens. But truly, truly disturbing. Any other questions right now? I'm going to then jump ahead. There are some other stories, but I don't know, you guys. I'm feeling a little tired here. I'm going to jump to my favorite part of the show, which is showing you crazy shit tweeted by the transformed wife. You know you love it. Let's talk about this one right here. Let's blow this up so you can see it. This is from the transformed wife. Again, there's no, this is not a continuation of a story. This is just a standalone tweet. The pastor at our last church sent his sons to the local public high school. His wife told me it was the most oppressive place she'd ever stepped foot on. Why would anyone who claims the name of Christ send their children to some place that is oppressive? This means that demonic activity is alive and well. I have felt this before, and it's terrifying. Get your children out from the demonic public schools and colleges now. Protect their souls. One, there's no pastor. Tell us the name of the pastor. I want to know what this guy did. Why did he send his kids to public schools if he's so worried about them? But also, why are public schools oppressive? You got to explain what they found so damn problematic about public schools. Like, was it the classes? Was it sex education? Was it something else? What is it that you have a problem with? Because every time I hear conservative anybody's complain about public schools, and it's always the same kind of accusations. Teachers are trying to groom their kids. Students are, they have kitty litter boxes because they're all furries, and it's all hoaxes, and none of it's true. And they can never point to any school that's actually doing that sort of thing. And maybe they're upset about books that kids have to read because they're challenging and not Kevin Sorbo kids books or something. But it's all BS. I'm telling you this as a former public school teacher. Teachers do not have time to do anything besides the stuff they actually got to get done. You think I have time to get your kid to change genders? No one has that kind of time in a public school. Also, your kid's not, we don't care about that sort of thing. We're not interested in your kids. We don't care what gender they choose to be, whatever they are. Like, no one's thinking about that. We have too much to do. Teachers have a lot to do. So again, I go back to why is it oppressive? No idea. I don't know what she's talking about. And then Here's her next. Here's a different tweet. Same lady, because again, she's crazy. Again, this just comes out of nowhere. She just starts the middle of the story before ever starting the beginning. He's a pastor and has 5 young children. His wife died soon after his 5th baby was born 2 years ago. Yikes. He's marrying a precious young woman today that we know and love. It's going to be a great day celebrating the marriage of 2 becoming 1. God created a beautiful love story for them. God created a beautiful love story for a pastor and a young woman whose age is weirdly not mentioned, but young is. And the beautiful love story involves a wife who died after 5 kids. I do not understand Christians who call that a beautiful love story. Like, the wife died. How come none of you seem to care about that? That doesn't seem like a happy ending. Like, come on, have the sense to say, okay, it's a tragedy, but they turned it into something positive. I understand that. And I'm not mad at the pastor for getting remarried. That makes sense. But don't call it a beautiful love story when there's a death involved. It's kind of like those people who say there was a hurricane in my city, but at least God allowed the church to stay upright, or he left the Bible intact. It's like 72 people just died in the hurricane. This is not a happy story. I think Mrs. Betty Bowers on Twitter said something like, thanking God for allowing you to survive. A miracle is like thanking a serial killer for going after, your neighbors next door. Like, no, you're kind of missing the bigger picture here. Stop giving thanks to God for something this horrific. I did have one more tweet for you, and then I swear I'm done. And I'm only sharing this because I had to look at this. So I want you to look at this. And then I want this image to be in your head for the next several days until we do this live stream again. From Joshua Feuerstein. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Known this guy for years. No idea how to pronounce his name. Joshua Feuerstein, usually the MAGA backward hat dude who got mad at Starbucks for having red cups over Christmas, who once told his fans, give me like $20,000 to buy a camera for my videos. And then it just never appeared again. Nothing better than a hot bath while listening to Ted Cruz on a podcast. Life is good. You guys. He wants you to imagine him having a hot bath, and his choice for how to relax in a hot bath is listening to Ted Cruz. I don't care if it's a podcast. No one has ever said, I'm going to relax by listening to Ted Cruz. Never. Ted Cruz's wife will not relax by listening to Ted Cruz. And yet this dude, whose whole thing is gay people and trans people are bad and evil, is like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take off all my clothes, light up some candles, listen to Ted Cruz in my ears. Life is good. What is wrong with these guys? Oh my God. All right. I did have other stories, but I swear I'm done. It's been too long of a day. I should pack. I don't know. What other questions do we have before I sign off for the day? If there's anything else, last chance to get them in. And while you were doing that, I will just put this up here. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/Hemant. You guys, this YouTube channel is almost at 100,000 subscribers. That's fun. I didn't know that could happen, but we're close. It's like at 98 point something. It'll happen soon, maybe. So that's fun and exciting. If there are any other questions, I'm just looking at the end here. Otherwise, if you're in Denver again, check me out on Saturday. Thank you so much to Den for helping out with moderation and helping these questions pop up all the time. I appreciate that. Someone is asking, have I heard of Grace City Church? That name does sound familiar, but I don't think I could tell you any specifics about them unless I looked it up. So I'm sorry. I don't know it off the top of my head. But in any case, I will be back next week on Friday at the normal time, and maybe I'll do some of these stories I put on the chopping block for now. But oh God, someone's asking math questions now. I'm not answering your math questions. That's above my pay grade these days. Have a wonderful week. Thank you, Den. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.